I give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. We thank the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Great Lakes region for his insightful briefing and sustained engagement. We also thank the Executive Director of UN Women for grounding our discussion in the lived realities of those most affected by this conflict. We take note of the Secretary General's report on the implementation of the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework submitted pursuant to Resolution 2808 of 2025, and we do certainly welcome warmly the presence of colleagues and distinguished representatives from the Great Lakes region. Mr. President, as African members of this council, the A3 is clear-eyed about one fundamental truth. There can be no peace in Africa while the Great Lakes region remains unstable. African leaders, as we just heard, have stepped up. They have stepped forward. African mediation is crucially underway. These efforts deserve strong and sustained international support matched by concrete follow-through actions of this Council and the broader international community. In this regard, we commend the mediation and coordination efforts led by Their Excellencies Presidents João Lourenço, Faure Gnassingbé, and Yoweri Museveni. These African-led initiatives truly matter to the resolution of this conflict, but they will only succeed if they are coherent, enforced, and sufficiently supported to deliver results. When mediation speaks in multiple voices, spoilers listen carefully, and they will act accordingly. The Washington Accords and the Doha framework demonstrate that diplomacy remains alive. But agreements without credible and collective commitment to implementation do not build trust, nor do they stop a single bullet. On the ground, as we have heard, trust continues to erode. Parallel power structures persist, and accusations travel faster than confidence can be rebuilt under such circumstances. For this reason, the A3 calls for a single, results-driven implementation framework, African-led and firmly anchored in the Peace, Security, and Cooperation framework. This framework must do four things: clearly and without ambiguity. One, it must set measurable obligations with clear timelines. Two, it must establish impartial verification protected from political convenience. Three, it must apply consequences when commitments are ignored. And 4, it must ensure coordination among mediation tracks rather than competition between them. Mr. President, peace may be declared in agreements, but experience teaches us that too often peace must be enforced through discipline and accountability. As we have been informed, the security situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo is deteriorating, not incrementally, but dangerously. This poses a serious threat to regional and international peace. The A3 calls for an immediate end to hostilities as required by Resolution 2773 of 2025 and reiterated in Resolution 2808 of 2026. The same obligation is embedded in the Washington agreements and the Doha process. These commitments must be fully respected. At the same time, we are deeply concerned by the continued expansion of armed groups, including the use of heavy weapons and armed drones in civilian areas, which we just heard again confirmed by the Special Envoy. This, the A3 believes, is in clear violation of international humanitarian law and cannot be ignored. Therefore, the A3 condemns these actions without qualification. Let us be clear. International humanitarian law is not optional. Respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity is non-negotiable. As the briefers have variously informed, a failure to reverse this trajectory risks regional spillover and dangerous miscalculation in the Great Lakes region. In this context, the A3 welcomes all initiatives aimed at accelerating the operationalization of the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program for foreign combatants. We reiterate our call for sustained support to this program. Each country in the region must assume its responsibilities by establishing national mechanisms to address armed groups operating within its territory and facilitating their return to their countries of origin. Mr. President, in the Great Lakes region, as the reports confirm, the humanitarian situation remains dire. More than 6 million people have been displaced. Children are malnourished, not because solutions are lacking, but because resources have not arrived. Humanitarian response plans remain severely underfunded. Access is constrained. Host communities are stretched to breaking points. The stubborn truth is that humanitarian response cannot rely on sympathy alone. It requires predictable financing, unconditional access, and fair burden sharing. In this regard, the A3 calls upon the UNHCR to work closely with countries of the Great Lakes region to strengthen a regional approach to cross-border refugee risk management and to ensure that when conditions permit, refugees are supported in achieving a safe, voluntary, and dignified return to their respective countries. Mr. President, protection of civilians is not a footnote to mediation. It is the measure of whether mediation is actually worth the name. Accountability must advance alongside dialogue, not later, not someday, not anytime soon, but now. History reminds all of us that peace built on silence around abuses will not long endure. Distinguished colleagues, the conflict in the Great Lakes region is sustained not only by weapons, but by profits. The illicit exploitation of natural resources continues to finance instability. Tackling impunity in this domain requires action across the entire chain, from production to export to exploitation. The A3 therefore welcomes efforts, including those emerging from the Gaborone workshop, to strengthen transparency, traceability, and governance in the extractive sector. We also support the establishment of a mechanism similar to the Kimberley process to address gold from conflict zones. Disrupting the political economy of violence is not secondary. It is central to ending this war. The peace, security, and cooperation framework remains the region's most credible roadmap. But roadmaps do not move people. Decisions do. The people of the Great Lakes do not need more agreements. They need proof that agreements matter. This council must signal clearly and collectively that obstruction will be exposed, violations will be addressed, and African-led solutions will be matched by international support and resolve. Anything less risks turning this movement into yet another missed opportunity, a failure none of us should accept, and certainly the people of the Great Lakes region do not deserve. In closing, the A3 reaffirms its unwavering support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and of all the brotherly nations of the Great Lakes region, an essential pillar of our African continent. And I thank you for your kind attention.
I now give the floor to Ms. Sima Sami Bahous.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, my thanks to the Permanent Representative, His Excellency Ambassador Jamal Faris Al-Ruwai'i, and the mission of the Kingdom of Bahrain for convening this session and for the kind invitation. My thanks also to Special Envoy Huang Chi for his briefing and for our excellent collaboration on women, peace, and security, and in making women's priorities and leadership central to prevention, peace building, and regional stability. Excellencies, the opportunities of women's leadership for peace in the Great Lakes region are unique and transformative and give us hope. I remind us that the Security Council's first resolution on women, peace, and security in the year 2000 was in part inspired by Nelson Mandela's support to Burundian women to play their rightful part in ending the civil war in their country. Their proposals, ideas, and energies suffused the Arusha Accords. War ended. Burundi today boasts one of the highest percentages of women's representation in politics in its region, alongside thousands of women mediators working at local level, preventing small conflicts from becoming bigger ones. UN Women is proud to support such efforts. In the Karamoja region of Uganda, for example, women lead cross-border dialogues to prevent conflict and peace. In Uganda also, women's representation in certain districts and sub-county peace committees have nearly tripled, from 17% in 2022 to 46% in 2025. 21 districts now have local action plans on women, peace, and security, 16 of which were supported directly by UN Women. So, Excellencies, peace in this region, as we have heard, hinges on the eastern region of the DRC, and peace in the DRC will only be secured when women are treated not as collateral victims and their bodies as spoils of war, but as empowered agents of stability, accountability, and peace. Without safety, women cannot lead, and without their leadership, peace and recovery efforts fail. The same applies across the broader region. Excellencies, the Great Lakes region offers fertile ground for women's leadership in peace and security, with some of the highest percentages of women representation in politics in the world. 11 of 12 countries of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region have national action plans on women, peace, and security. The new Regional Action Plan 2026-2030 focuses on integrating women into peace building and addressing gender-based violence, including in digital spaces. The Regional Gender Barometer monitors gender equality efforts in the region. And there is the Advisory Board for Women, Peace and Security in the Great Lakes region. I thank the Special Envoy for his collaboration and efforts to turn this platform into a mechanism that can link the effort of women at the grassroots level with high-level diplomacy. The soon-to-be-adopted African Union Commission framework will enforce a minimum 30% women's representation in AU-led mediation based on the mandate outlined by the African Union's Peace and Security Council. UN Women applauds this groundbreaking initiative and calls on other multilateral bodies to follow their lead. Specifically, Excellencies, in DRC, despite the conflict, we see a positive trajectory for women's representation in politics, including senior leadership. And we see where that can lead. It can lead to greater accountability for gender-based violence and crimes, with hundreds of members of rebel groups and the DRC's own armed forces put on trial for sexual violence, ensuring that women, albeit still in small numbers, receive the justice they deserve. The space is there. The potential rewards are game-changing. So I have 3 asks of you today, Excellencies. First, I ask that you lend your voice evermore to calls for equal representation of women in peacemaking efforts in the DRC and the broader region. More women in parliament or cabinets is positive, but does not guarantee meaningful representation in peace and security decision-making. While 2 of the 5 facilitators of the AU-led process are now women, the Washington Accords are silent on women, gender-related issues, and even the sexual violence that has been both hallmark and driver of conflict. UN Women has supported Congolese women's advocacy, but without this Security Council's support, they will remain on the outside looking in. Second, I ask that you protect the peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, and its critical mandate in the DRC, and recall the hundreds of trials against perpetrators of conflict-related violence. Recall the women activists and human rights defenders who have enjoyed MONUSCO's protection. Recall the women supported in their crucial work in local peace efforts between the Hema and the Lendu in Ituri. Recall also that peacekeepers tailor patrols to alert specific areas from local women, that they have opened their bases to protect displaced women at imminent risk. Now, consider, Excellencies, what removing this means. Consider the 60% of women human rights defenders in North Kivu reporting ongoing direct threats. Consider Médecins Sans Frontières reports of 28,000 victims of sexual and gender-based violence in the first half of last year. And consider that currently the mission has no senior women's protection advisor and a weakened gender unit. MONUSCO, but more importantly, those civilian women and girls, men and boys it serves deserve much better. Third, I ask you to support women-led and youth-led civil society organizations and to protect civic space. Women's organizations and youth are crucial but unappreciated frontline peace-building actors. They also represent critical defense against democratic erosion, which can lead to more conflict. In this region, as much as any, despite high percentages of women in politics, perhaps even in part in pushback to it, we see precisely that democratic erosion, narrowing space for civil society and human rights. Despite this, we are far from meeting the needs. We could empower thousands of women peace actors across the Great Lakes at a fraction of the cost of military spending for vastly better results. The Security Council could make the difference to unlocking the necessary support and offering protection in and of itself. So, Excellencies, let me just add that my asks are neither impractical nor beyond what this august Council can do. We owe the women of the Great Lakes region, those determined, inspiring women who work tirelessly today for peace tomorrow. We owe them our best. The opportunity is there. The path to seizing it is clear. I urge all of us to work that path together now and to commit to gender equality and women's leadership so that this region can finally find peace. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. Sima Sami Bahous for her briefing. I now give the floor
to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to start by thanking Special Envoy Sia and Executive Director Bahous for their insightful briefings. I would also like to welcome the participation of the representatives of Angola and Rwanda in today's meeting. Madam President, I would like to make the following points. First, despite continuous collective international and regional efforts and considerable achievements, the armed conflict in the DRC continues. We are alarmed by the continuous violence in eastern DRC and the broader regional escalations. We reiterate that Resolution 2773 must be implemented immediately, fully, and unconditionally. The momentum generated by the Washington Accords must be preserved. We welcome all efforts aimed at securing a ceasefire and advancing sustainable peace, stability, and reconciliation in eastern DRC. We commend the United States, Qatar, the African Union, and Angola for their important mediation efforts. All parties must de-escalate immediately, honor the commitments they have undertaken under the various peace processes, and accelerate their implementation. AFC M23 must immediately cease hostilities and withdraw all troops from Goma, Bukavu, and all other areas under its control. The airports of Goma and Kavumu must reopen without delay. All restrictions on MONUSCO's freedom of movement must be lifted. Second, we are deeply concerned about the exacerbation of an already dire humanitarian situation. The continuous M23 offensive in eastern DRC has led to a further and mounting increase of IDPs in the Great Lakes region. We are particularly alarmed by the almost 6.5 million internally displaced persons recorded as of last February, with 3.3 million IDPs in North and South Kivu and almost 1 million in Ituri alone. Food insecurity is affecting already more than 2 million people in Uganda and is projected to affect more than 26 million people in the DRC and another million in Burundi over the first semester of 2026. Recurring communicable diseases and natural disasters triggered by climate change remain also major challenges for the region. We strongly condemn all human rights violations and abuses in the countries of the region, as reported by the Secretary General. We are particularly concerned about the grave human rights violations and abuses committed against women and children, notably large-scale recruitment and use of children, abductions, killings and maiming, and shocking levels of conflict-related sexual violence. All perpetrators of human rights violations must be brought to justice. Third, we welcome the Special Envoy's recent engagements with the Special Representative of the Secretary General for CAC and the Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. We also welcome the support of his office to non-military responses through the Contact and Coordination Group and the first Regional Standard Operating Procedure Framework document for cooperation on the repatriation of foreign combatants across the Great Lakes region. We stress on the need of cross-border coordination with transparency and accountability for an orderly, safe, voluntary, verified, dignified, and predictable extraction and repatriation of ex-combatants. We believe in the meaningful and active participation of women and youth in the political and peace processes as key element for sustainable peace in the Great Lakes region and in their pivotal role for the success of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. In conclusion, Madam President, we concur that the Secretary General on his assessment that building trust and confidence between the parties and ensuring inclusivity remain essential for the collaboration of all the countries of the Great Lakes region towards sustainable, lasting peace, stability and prosperity. Greece will continue to engage constructively with all partners in the Security Council as well as bilaterally towards this end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam President. Panama would like to express its thanks for the briefing by the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Great Lakes region, Mr. Huangxia. We also recognize the valuable participation of the Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Sima Bahous, whose leadership we applaud and whose presence at this meeting underscores the importance of fully including the women, peace and security agenda in efforts towards stabilization in the region. At the same time, we recognize the presence of the permanent representatives of Angola and Rwanda who join us today. Panama takes note of the report of the Secretary General on the implementation of the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the region. We recognize the diplomatic efforts sustained over the reporting period, including the Washington and Doha processes, as well as the work of the African Union and the panel of facilitators, as well as regional mechanisms to forge ahead towards a lasting political settlement. We particularly welcome the gradual operationalization of the ceasefire verification mechanisms and efforts to strengthen coordination between regional initiatives. However, we are extremely concerned that this progress has not yet translated to tangible improvements on the ground. The security situation in the eastern DRC continues to deteriorate with the expansion of armed operations, the increasing use of drones in the conflict, and recent attacks, including in Goma on the 11th of March, which claimed the lives of civilians, including a UNICEF staff member. We note with concern the consolidation of parallel administrative structures as a part of the Rio-Congo Alliance and the M23. And in a certain part of the Kivus, their progress in December, as well as the persistent activity of the Allied Democratic Forces, responsible for at least 431 civilian deaths during the reporting period. We are also concerned by the worsening humanitarian crisis. The report flags that 6.4 million people remain internally displaced, and that 14.9 million require humanitarian assistance, while only 25.7% of the required funding has been mobilized. This severely hampers the international response to this humanitarian crisis. Panama also wishes to express its concern at the violations of human rights that have been documented, including violence on civilians, vulnerable communities, and the rise in conflict-related sexual violence, which has a disproportionate effect on women and girls. Madam President, in this context, Panama wishes to underscore 3 priority points. We reiterate the need for a full, verifiable implementation of the commitments undertaken through the Washington and Doha processes, including the finalization of the 6 pending protocols relating to humanitarian access, the return of displaced persons, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, economic recovery, transitional justice, and restoration of the state's authority. We deem it essential to strengthen consistency between the various mediation initiatives at a continental and regional level, avoiding fragmenting efforts and strengthening African leadership in the quest for sustainable solutions. We highlight the importance of addressing the root causes of the conflict, including the illegal exploitation of natural resources, as well as the importance of guaranteeing the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all peace processes. In this regard, Panama highlights the importance of strengthening the protection of women, female human rights defenders, and supporting the implementation of regional commitments on the participation of women in ceasefire verification mechanisms, as well as ensuring the effective inclusion of women in national dialogue processes that are currently being prepared for in the DRC. Panama reaffirms its support for the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework as the cornerstone of the regional stability architecture. We reiterate our support for the role of the Special Envoy and of the United Nations in promoting dialogue, de-escalation, and international cooperation. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And I would like to thank also Special Envoy Sia and Executive Director Bahous for their briefings and for highlighting the transformative potential of women's participation across the Great Lakes region. Madam President, allow me first to address the current critical situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In line with resolutions 2773 and 2808, as well as the commitments made under the Washington Accords and the Doha Framework for Peace, we urge the parties to immediately implement a permanent and verifiable ceasefire. In accordance with these resolutions, we reiterate the calls on Rwanda to withdraw its troops from the DRC, for the DRC to neutralize the FDLR, and for the M23 to immediately cease its offensive operations and withdraw from all controlled areas. We reaffirm the centrality of the AU-led mediation track in ensuring harmonization and coherence among peace efforts in the DRC, and we welcome the efforts of Togo and the AU panel of facilitators in this regard. We commend the International Conference for the Great Lakes region's work in consolidating the ceasefire monitoring architecture through the verification mechanism with the key support of MONUSCO in line with Resolution 2808. We encourage the Special Envoy and his office to continue to support these efforts for peace. We especially urge for the participation of women in the ongoing peace process, whereas we've heard today, they're almost entirely absent. Madam President, turning to regional cooperation, We welcome initiatives that enhance trust among states, support legal trade, and create shared economic incentives for peace. In that spirit, we urge the expansion of the Regional Economic Integration Framework to include more countries from the region. This has the potential to drive economic progress and improve the lives of communities across the Great Lakes. So has the continued efforts to strengthen transparent natural resource management, as many have mentioned here today. Madam President, Denmark is deeply concerned by the deteriorating human rights situation across the Great Lakes region, marked by persistent violations and hate speech. In Eastern DRC, the scale and brutality of violence remains alarming, with armed groups responsible for the majority of abuses, including killings, sexual and gender-based violence, and forced displacement. At the same time, reports of violation by state actors, as well as targeted abuses against specific communities, underscore the urgent need for accountability and the protection of all civilians without discrimination. Beyond the DRC, trends across the region point to increasing restrictions on political and civic space. We underscore the importance of upholding human rights and the rule of law, ensuring accountability for violations, and safeguarding inclusive political processes. And as we've been reminded today, we need to support women and youth-led CSOs and protect the civic space. These are the essential foundations for sustainable peace and stability in the region. Madam President, the path to lasting peace in the Great Lakes region will not be forged through force of arms, but through the steady resolve of cooperation, accountable governance, and a shared determination to address the root causes of conflict. Denmark stands ready to work with all stakeholders to advance dialogue, strengthen partnerships, and uphold the principles that underpin durable peace. I thank you.